Hey everybody, it's John. Some of you may know me from the steampunk band The Cog is Dead. Some of you know me as a voice actor from games like Brawl Stars and Clash Royale.
Electrify!
And I'm sure plenty of you have absolutely no idea who I am. But if you have seen me before, then you may have noticed that I'm not quite as heavy as I used to be. I have really been trying to take care of myself, and I'm happy to say that my health and quality of life have improved significantly, and I'm actually in the best shape I've ever been. Believe it or not, I've lost 130 pounds, which still doesn't really sound right to say. Like, it's hard to wrap my head around that actually being true, but I mean, I've seen the scale, and I've seen myself, so it has to be true. But I've had some people ask me how I did it. Some who are like me, who have struggled with their weight all their lives, and others who are just curious. So I thought I'd make this video and share with you how I lost 130 pounds and went from this to this. Yo, how's everybody doing? This is John Mandelli, and I'm documenting my weight loss. I figured this is a good way to keep me motivated, and a nice way to look back and compare what I used to look like to what I look like now that I've lost the weight. Even though now, as I'm filming this, I'm still heavy. Hopefully, looking back on it in the future, which will be now for you watching it now, will be now. Yes, this is the beginning of my weight loss journey. Before I get into it, I just want to say, obviously, I am not a medical professional, so nothing in this video should be taken as medical advice. This is just me sharing my own personal experience. These are the things that I have gone through and the changes that I wanted to make for myself. I also want to be clear that I am not trying to body shame anyone or tell anyone what they should do. Everyone has every right to eat whatever they want and make whatever health decisions they want to make for themselves. Your life is personal to you. I just want you to be happy and love yourself. This is me just talking about me, and what I'm doing seems to be working for me, and that's why I'm doing it. Oh, and just so you know, I'm going to be talking a lot in this video, so it might be kind of long. I wanted to share as much of my personal story as possible because there's a chance that it could help someone else who's having a similar struggle. Maybe I'll post a streamlined, short and sweet version of the video later on that solely focuses on the weight loss process, but this is the full extended story. So if you're not interested in hearing about my past eating habits and the struggle with weight, and just want to know what changes I made to finally achieve the weight loss, then you can skip ahead to this timestamp right here and find out my crazy weight loss secret. Spoiler alert, there is no secret. I just changed my habits, but I'll share what I did with you. All right, so let's get into it. The gist of it is, I, like so many other people, have struggled with my weight my entire life. I was a fat kid who grew into a fatter teen who grew into an even fatter adult. And by the way, it's still really weird for me to use the word fat because I grew up being taught that it is rude to call someone fat, but now fat people call ourselves fat, and yes, I still think of myself as a fat person, having been a fat person my entire life, and I think I probably always will to some degree. But as far back as I can remember, I was always a big eater. But something I always thought was strange about me is I could never figure out the root cause of why I developed those eating habits. Anytime I listened to people's stories about why they became overeaters, there was usually some sort of a childhood trauma or abuse or some sort of a horrible situation that led to them turning to food for comfort. They thought of food as a friend and it was always there for them. And honestly, my childhood was really good. Somehow I didn't have any major trauma or abuse as a kid. My parents are amazing. It was an incredibly loving environment. They were always putting their kids' needs first. They were super supportive of all of my interests in music and art, and still are today. So I always just figured it was just because I really, really love food, which, I mean, I feel like an idiot saying I love food because everybody loves food. We all require food to live, and we all love to eat the foods that taste good to us. But I developed a habit of always wanting to eat to excess at a very young age. A regular-sized portion of something never seemed like enough. At dinner, I always wanted to go back for seconds. If it was something I really liked, even thirds sometimes. I feel like if anything, I've always had an issue with self-control. If it was something that I liked and that I wanted, I couldn't control myself. I just went for it. And I've always been that way with more than just food. It was similar with all of my interests. As a kid, I loved art and animation, and so I started drawing and eventually learned to animate. I got hired by my school board in high school to make an animated series, and I've worked on a bunch of animation projects since then. I wanted to act and perform, and so I did plays and musicals, and eventually wrote my own musical numbers and acted in a bunch of comedy sketches. I wanted to be a filmmaker and make movies, and so me and my friends made a ton of videos and eventually committed to making a full-length movie that got an international distribution deal at the Cannes Film Festival. I wanted to start a band, and so just for fun, I started a band called The Cog Is Dead and completely threw myself into it, and we eventually gained an amazing fan base all over the world and have performed all over the United States. I wanted to be a voice actor, and so I dove headfirst into that until I became a professional, eventually booking national television work and major video games along the way. And the reason I mention all these things is not to brag. It's just to give you an idea of just how committed I have always been to the things that I love and how obsessively far I have been willing to go when I really want something. I've always lived by the words that Marty McFly told George in Back to the Future.
If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
And I still truly believe that. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I have always had a big appetite for the things that I love, and food is one of those things. Side note, my tendency to overindulge also became a bit of a problem for me in another way, but that's a whole other story. That's actually how I chipped this tooth. But I actually did decide to give up alcohol 2 years ago, and while that's not a necessity for weight loss, it actually did help me a great deal. Because if you thought I had trouble with self-control around food when I was sober, you should have seen me clean out a fridge after a few drinks. But anyway, very early on in life, I developed a habit of eating until I was stuffed. I loved my favorite foods, and to me, enjoying them meant eating as much of them as I possibly could. For me, overeating was just eating. At school lunch, I always wanted an extra piece of that rectangular school cafeteria pizza. By the time I was in my teens, I would eat whole pizzas by myself. Everything for me had to be extra large portions. I remember joking with a friend that McDonald's should make a quarter pounder with 4 beef patties that they just call the pounder. The worst physical pain I can remember ever being in after a meal was sometime in my mid-20s when I went with a group of friends to Olive Garden and I ordered the Tour of Italy. If you're not familiar, the Tour of Italy is a platter with 3 different items such as lasagna, chicken parmesan, and fettuccine alfredo, which is already a generous amount of food. But of course, Olive Garden also has unlimited soup and breadsticks, which of course I had before the meal, especially extra breadsticks. And someone in the group ordered appetizers for the table, so of course I had some of that. And I'm pretty sure I had dessert too. By the time I finished eating everything, my stomach was in physical pain. I remember riding home, laying in the back of my friend's van with my stomach aching in a way I had never experienced before. I mean, every bump in the road caused me discomfort. Every breath was painful. And yet, I still didn't learn, and I continued the same pattern of behavior. It took me many, many years before I finally realized this is the behavior of an addict. I always just thought I just really love food, and eating is one of life's great pleasures. It took me until my 30s to finally realize that I had an overeating addiction. It just wasn't even something that I even considered could be addictive. I thought I knew what addictive substances were. Nicotine is addictive. Alcohol is addictive. Meth is addictive. But food is essential for life. Food is sustenance. And I'd never made the connection that I was addicted to eating large amounts of food. But the reality is people can get addicted to anything. Gambling, shopping, social media. If it's pleasurable and it triggers the reward center of your brain and you get that dopamine release, then it can be addictive. And for me, there was no greater high than shoveling bite after bite of the best tasting foods that I could get into my mouth. And looking back now, it's obvious, but for the majority of my life, it was just my normal behavior. To give you an idea of how bad this addiction was, I'm going to share with you the worst experience I ever had as a result of overeating. And fair bit of warning, it's pretty graphic and pretty gross. So if you don't want to hear about it, feel free to skip ahead to this timestamp right here. But I feel like it was a significant enough moment in my life that it's kind of important to share. So one night I went out to dinner with the other two producers of that movie I worked on, Will and Brendan, and I had a huge meal, which was common, but, you know, just way too much food. I don't remember everything I had, but I know there was an appetizer and fajitas were the entree and a dessert. Either way, it was a really, really big meal. And later that night, while I was sleeping, I was just suddenly and very painfully snapped awake by something blocking my airway. And I very quickly realized that I was choking on my own vomit. And like right in that moment, I immediately remembered that I'd heard of rock stars that died choking on their own vomit as a result of too much drugs or alcohol, but definitely never heard of it happening from too much food. And so after several awful minutes of coughing and trying to clear all of it out of my airway and my lungs, I was terrified to go back to sleep. You know, I was worried it would happen again. And so after thinking for a while as to what I should do, I finally decided that I needed to make myself throw up, which is something I had never done before or since, because I've always had a bit of a phobia around vomiting ever since I was a kid. It was just something that really bothered me, and so I avoided it at all costs. But at this point, I'm thinking it's either make myself puke or risk choking to death in my sleep. And I didn't want my roommates to hear me, so I actually snuck out of the house into the backyard by the shed. And there I was in the backyard trying to force myself to throw up. And because I have such an aversion to vomiting, it took a lot of effort to really push myself past that phobia and try to ensure that I got everything out. Hey, I warned you that this story is gross. In the process of repeatedly trying to make myself vomit, I was heaving and straining so hard that the next day, when I looked in the mirror, my eyes were blood red. And I don't mean bloodshot with like some redness and irritation. I mean there was literally blood visible in the whites of my eyes. I had forced myself so hard to throw up that I broke blood vessels in my eyes. Seriously, I have a photo. So if you don't want to see my bloody eyeballs, then look away now. Here it is. Yeah, that's a pretty startling sight to see in the mirror. Okay, you can look back now. That was my first major wake-up call that I had to make a change. I knew I could not ever eat that much again. And it was the first time I realized just how dangerous my eating habits really were. And I was determined that somehow I had to change and I had to lose weight. That said, it still took me over a decade to finally be successful, because that's how hard it is to overcome addiction. I'm gonna do it. Without further ado, let's begin. I don't think it's necessary to go over every single detail of every diet I tried and failed over the next 10 years and all the ups and downs.
It's been 1 week since I've started my diet, and I've lost 5 pounds.
I kind of gained a little weight.
They had a whole coffee bar with cupcakes and stuff, and I had some of that because it was the wedding. So it's definitely going to be hard to keep the balance.
But I mean, I've done one where I'd eat 6 small meals throughout the day. I tried whole food plant-based diet. I've done keto. I have done juice fasts. I've tried obsessively tracking every single calorie of every single day. I've tried a lot. And every time I would manage to find a measure of success in every single one, sometimes even losing significant amounts of weight. But every single time I would think I finally found the right diet that would work for me. Eventually, I would slowly start to have cheat meals and go back to my old habits and eventually just completely fall off the wagon, which only now do I look back and kind of refer to those as relapses. But by 2017, I had gotten up to over 300 pounds.
Hey, what's up? This is John, and currently I weigh about 300 pounds.
The highest number I remember ever seeing on the scale was 311. And it is the heaviest I've ever been, and it was a weight that I had sworn for years, up and down, that I would never, ever let myself get to. And yet here I was, over 300 pounds. And again, let me stress, I am not trying to body shame anyone. And I also know that there are those of you watching who weigh more than I did at my heaviest who would love to get down to 300. You know, I'm just sharing how I was feeling at the time. All of us are at different places physically, mentally, and emotionally. But when I weighed over 300 pounds, I was very unhappy with the way I looked and the way I felt. And I was feeling rough. It was the most I'd ever weighed and the most physically challenging my weight had ever been. Doing physical activity for any amount of time was difficult. If I went for a walk in the park, I would have to stop halfway and sit at a bench for a few minutes. Bending down to tie my shoes, heck, bending down period required more effort. Just getting out of bed required more effort. I was constantly out of breath, constantly needed to take breaks, and I was always sweating profusely. Apparently, even just breathing while I was sitting around required more effort, which I didn't even notice, but multiple times my wife and I'd be sitting on the couch watching TV and she'd look over at me concerned, like, "Are you okay?" And I'd just say, "Yeah, why?" And she'd go, "You're breathing heavy." I didn't even realize. And that happened on multiple occasions. So you can imagine that being the singer and guitarist in an energetic steampunk band must have just been a walk in the park. Well, considering that I would get winded on a literal walk in the park at the time, I guess it kind of was. Performing concerts at that time was the most difficult it had ever been. My idea of a good show is fast-paced and high energy. You know, I grew up admiring charismatic frontmen like Freddie Mercury and his amazing showmanship, or the frenetic punk rock energy of Green Day's Billy Joe Armstrong. Like, that's the kind of energy that I wanted to bring to The Cog Is Dead. And when I was over 300 pounds, I still tried. But there were so many shows where I was up there on stage just dying. You know, there were parts of the shows where in the past I used to run or jump, and I had to stop doing that because otherwise I would be too out of breath to sing. You know, even songs that didn't require a lot of movement, I would still feel like I needed a break halfway through in a song that's just 3 minutes long. Constantly out of breath, guzzling water like crazy, sweating all over the stage. My lower back was killing me, my feet were aching, and I was just constantly frustrated that I couldn't perform the way I wanted to. As much as I try to give my all at every performance, there were some nights at some of the shows with smaller turnouts where I'd be halfway through the set up there just thinking, this was a mistake. I shouldn't have booked this show. I should have just stayed home. I am miserable. It was just getting too physically hard to do my job. And finally, in early 2018, I was at my breaking point. I was in my early 30s and my health was the worst it had ever been. I had already been previously diagnosed with hypertension after I was feeling awful for several weeks, and I went to get my blood pressure checked at a pharmacy, and it was somewhere dangerously high, like 210 over 116 or just something insane. And I went to the ER and they put me on lisinopril and hydrochlorothiazide. And I was put on levothyroxine for hypothyroidism. My cholesterol was high, so my doctor put me on pravastatin to try to lower it. Oh, and I still clearly remember the first time getting paperwork from my doctor that said morbid obesity there in black and white on the printout, which, I mean, yeah, I knew I was morbidly obese, but it was the first time actually seeing the words on paperwork from a doctor's office. And there was one point where even while I was dieting, I couldn't get my blood pressure to go down, no matter how little sodium I ate. And I ended up back in the ER because my blood pressure wouldn't go down, my heart rate was constantly elevated, and I had been having some minor chest pain anytime I did physical activity. So then another medication, amlodipine, was added to my growing list of prescriptions. And at that point, I just thought, where will my health be at 40 or at 50? I was determined that I had to take better care of myself. So in May of 2018, I was determined to somehow make a permanent change. I wasn't sure yet exactly how, but I had that determination. And so I started with what I knew. I started walking every day and trying different diets.
I am basically documenting my attempt to lose the weight and get healthier, get off my blood pressure medications, my cholesterol medications, and all of that.
And then by sheer coincidence, right around the same time that I was really starting to work on improving my health, I heard that Kevin Smith, the director of the Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob movies, had just suffered a massive heart attack and narrowly escaped death.
He goes, "You're 100% blocked, 100% occlusion." He's going, "We got to go right now." And he goes, "You're a comic book guy." I said, "Yeah, I like comics." And he goes, That artery that's blocked up, the LAD, they call it the widow maker. Because in 80% of the cases of 100% blockage, people die. But you're gonna be in the 20% because I'm good at what I do. And then he disappeared into my crotch and he saved my life, man. So
thankfully, he was able to immediately receive life-saving medical care and he survived. But it really got me thinking even more about the reason why I was starting on this journey. Kevin Smith is only 16 years older than I am. It gave me even more motivation that I need to do this. Like, if I was feeling that bad then, what would my health look like in 15 years, 20 years? Would I even make it another 20 years? And as I followed Kevin Smith's progress after his heart attack, and I kept focused on my own goals, I saw him make incredible changes to his lifestyle, become more active, and drop an astonishing amount of weight. And his experience and example just really motivated and encouraged me to keep at it. So I remained determined. And over the next 4 years, I lost weight, I regained some, I regained some, and I never went back to over 300 pounds, but I still struggled to find sustainable weight loss and figure out how to maintain my weight. And 1 year ago, everything finally changed. And the funny thing is, it didn't start with me looking for a weight loss solution. So as a kid, I was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I am so incredibly grateful and fortunate to have been diagnosed at a very young age, because throughout my life, it explained why I had trouble focusing on mundane tasks and also why I'm able to really focus obsessively on the things that interest me.
How's it going, Timmy?
I'm freaking out, Mr. Fluffy.
It's kind of funny because attention deficit almost seems like the wrong label for the disorder, because we don't have an attention deficiency. I think if anything, we have an attention overload. We are constantly looking for whatever is the most exciting, stimulating, interesting thing at any given moment. It's one of the reasons why we are so easily distracted. Our brains are just wired to be on this continual quest for dopamine, which I know really explains why I can focus for hours or days or weeks or months or sometimes even years on writing a song, making an album, planning and shooting a music video, designing a logo, or even spending a decade of my life working on an absurdly ambitious independent movie that is highly special effects heavy and just massive in scale. If I didn't have ADHD and this hyperfocus and impulsivity, I don't think I would be doing what I do for a job, because if I really thought through all of the logistics before jumping into a new creative endeavor, I would have talked myself out of everything before even trying it. You know, it's kind of ridiculous what I do for a living. But on the flip side, and this is the attention deficit part of it, because our brains are wired to constantly be looking for stimulating things, it actually makes simple, boring, mundane daily tasks a nightmare and an unbelievable challenge. Scheduling, organization, time management, remembering important things I need to do, taking out the trash, tidying. This is my desk right now. Like, look at all this junk. I don't even know why it's all here. I've been telling myself to clean it for weeks. Answering emails, staying in touch with people, doing laundry, remembering to take the wet laundry out of the washer and put it in the dryer, remembering to turn the dryer on, remembering to close the fridge door, walking into a room and immediately forgetting the reason why I walked into the room. I can't even count the number of times that I have thought of something I need to look up on Google, and by the time I've taken my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it, and opened the browser, I have completely forgotten what I need to look up. I mean, what else? Paying bills on time, shaving, brushing my teeth, any tedious tasks, including completing tedious jobs for clients. And by the way, if any of my clients are watching, I love you. Please never stop sending me work. I really appreciate it. My brain just makes it a little bit more of a challenge to stay focused, but you know I always come through. You know I do. The problem was it was getting harder and harder to manage my work and get things done when they needed to be done. And for years, I felt like I sort of had a controlled chaos method of doing things, but I was finding myself getting more overwhelmed, more forgetful, and just struggling a lot more with my work and outside of work. You know, forgetting to keep up with dishes, general housework, important home repairs. It was just really becoming a bigger and bigger problem in my life. And after trying a few different organization tips and scheduling techniques that I would try to implement and stick to for maybe a few days before eventually reverting back to my old habits, I figured, okay, I've got to do something else and look for a way to really manage my issue. And it was right about that time that I saw an ad for a mental health app. By the way, I'd like to mention that this video has 0 sponsors. Nothing I talk about in this video is from a sponsor. So if I mention any apps or books or programs or celebrities or anything, it's only because it's something that I happened to come across along the way, and I'm sharing my own personal experience. I am not getting any money from any of them, although it would be kind of nice if I were. That said, the app I tried is called Sensa, and I just happened to see an ad on Instagram that had tips for people with ADHD, so I thought I'd try them, so I signed up for 6 months and gave it a shot. It helped some. I would say I have benefited from some of the scheduling and organization advice and breathing techniques and things that they put in there, and some of them I still put into practice. But as a whole, I don't really feel like the app was necessarily designed for the way an ADHD mind works. Actually, I think I stopped using it after about a month or two, and forgot to cancel my subscription because ADHD, and so I got charged for another 6 months, which they refused to refund. So that was fun, but also not an uncommon occurrence for me. But the major life-changing thing that I did get from Sensa was actually just one of those little add-on things that they offered me at checkout. Of course, they threw in another offer like so many companies love to do, and normally I never buy those little add-ons that people try to throw at you, but this one stood out because it was for a booklet called 10 Steps to Mindful Eating: How to Listen to Your Body and Create a Healthy Relationship with Food. And that really intrigued me because I knew I had never had a healthy relationship with food. And I kind of went back and forth for a minute trying to decide, do I really want to get this? Should I? And ultimately just decided, what the heck, why not? It's at a discounted price and it might have some good advice. And I assumed it could be a little bit helpful, but also knowing my track record over the course of my entire life of trying and failing at diets, you know, I figured it was going to be one more thing that I would try out and eventually fail at. But I bought it anyway, and you know, I looked over a couple of pages and was like, oh, okay, yeah, slow down when you're eating. It's a lot of the same stuff I've heard before, and just kind of forgot about it, because at the time, my main focus was my ADHD. And so during the process of trying to manage my ADHD, I started trying to get more exercise because I was noticing that more physical activity seemed to be helping me mentally and helping me focus. So I figured, yeah, I might as well try to get more exercise and improve my diet, because that can only help. And so to help me with my goal of trying to walk more frequently, my amazing wife got me an early 10-year anniversary gift. She got me a treadmill, which I'm sure may sound like a terrible anniversary gift to some of you. Hey, honey, you've been looking kind of chunky lately, so here's an exercise machine. Now maybe you can get off your fat butt and drop a few pounds. But seriously, I really wanted a slim treadmill. Anytime I'd ever lost weight in the past, I walked on a treadmill. And I wanted one that was small enough that I could fit it right here in the studio. And so she surprised me with one of the best gifts she ever got me. And if you think a treadmill sounds like a lame gift, you know what I got for her? A stand mixer for the kitchen. And before you get mad at me for buying my wife a kitchen appliance, that mixer is something she has been telling me she wants for years. It's not like I just got her a kitchen appliance and was like, here you go, woman, now make my dinner. I mean, this is something that we both actually wanted, and we both love to cook, so she was thrilled to get this mixer that she has been wanting for so long. Listen, after 10 years of marriage, practical gifts can be incredibly thoughtful and meaningful. All right, so I was thrilled to get that treadmill right there. So I started walking for an hour every morning, and I used my ADHD hyperfocus to start watching as many YouTube videos related to weight loss as I could possibly find. I was watching success stories and trying to hear from people who lost weight and kept it off and what they did. And I don't even know how many videos I watched. I was just continually trying to find motivation, because the one thing I did learn from past experience was anytime I had ever managed to lose a significant amount of weight and stick with something for a while, it was only when I was 100% focused and had constant motivation. And it was at some point during that time that I came across an interview on YouTube that contained exactly what I needed to hear. It was an interview with a woman named Chantel Ray who was sharing her weight loss success story and also talking about her book that explains her process called Waste Away.
Ha ha!
Again, I am not sponsored by her or endorsing the book. In fact, I have never even read the book or seen a single other video with Chantel Ray. Everything that I needed to at least start fixing my relationship with food came from a few simple points that I heard in this interview. I mean, the interview is even from a religious program that I have never watched before and have zero affiliation with. I was just solely focused on the principles regarding food. And that had my attention right from the start.
You've been very successful in the real estate business, but food was an obstacle for you.
Yes, this is one area. Everyone was like, you put your mind to something and you can do it.
I heard that and I was like, wait, what did she just say?
If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
That's basically Marty's quote. That's the thing I always say. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. Go on.
But when it came to eating and dieting, I couldn't do it.
Yes, exactly. That's what I've been saying for years.
I would lose weight, then I'd gain it, and I literally went on every single diet known to man.
You have my attention.
So what I did was I interviewed people who have been thin their whole life. They're not in bondage to food. And I said, what did you do? What did you eat? How'd you do it?
Now that really intrigued me because rather than just having some specific diet plan, she talked to people who had never had an eating problem.
Like if you were thin, but you were obsessive compulsive, just every time you ate something, you go for a 5-mile run. I didn't want that. I want someone who'd never been on a diet. They only ate when they're hungry, and they had no magnetic pull towards food. They could have a donut sitting right there, but if they weren't hungry, they weren't eating it.
And that was something that I couldn't relate to because if food was offered to me, I always accepted. I would go out with friends all the time, even if I wasn't hungry, and still eat because I just loved eating. And for me, food was always a treat or a reward. It was something I just did for pleasure. I rarely ever let myself experience true hunger because I would eat even when I wasn't truly hungry. And I never really understood true satisfaction or satiety because I would always eat well past natural fullness to the point of being stuffed. Part of the reason that I had so much trouble with mental clarity is because my body would have to divert extra energy to digesting the massive meals that I would eat all the time. So after every meal, I would have even more trouble focusing on top of the ADHD that I already have. And the advice from the people who had always eaten intuitively and never had an issue with food was really interesting.
When to know what's true hunger and when are you truly satisfied?
Most of us just eat just to eat, right? It's breakfast time, now I'm gonna eat. Lunchtime, now I'm gonna eat. Food was a bondage for me.
And I wanna be free.
I wanna be free. Eat what you really want. One of my friends, we went out to lunch together and she had ordered this grilled chicken salad, right? Because that's what she thought she was supposed to get, right? And I really wanted pizza. That's what I was craving. And so I ordered a small pizza and ate half of it and was fully satisfied. When she was done, she said to me, are you gonna eat the rest of that pizza? So she ate the full-size grilled chicken salad that she thought she was gonna have. And she was like, that salad just didn't satisfy me. What thin eaters know is how to have just enough food to satisfy them.
And that was when it clicked. These people that had never had an issue with food ate just enough to satisfy them and then knew when to stop. Meanwhile, I would eat my food insanely quickly in huge quantities and only use the feeling of being absolutely stuffed as my signal that I was full. I didn't know what full really was. I always thought, well, if I still have a little room to squeeze more in, I'm not full. But that's beyond full. That's dangerously overstuffed. Again, you would think that my experience with the bloody eyeballs would have told me that.
And so, like, if you would put a dessert in front of me, it would be gone. I'd be like, you know, just eating it as fast as I could. So I literally went out to restaurants with these women, and I watched them eat. They eat one bite. You know, if they like the whipped cream, they take the whipped cream and they eat that. I mean, by the time they had taken one bite, I was finished with my dessert. But they savor every bite and they eat what they truly want. When they take that first bite, it might be a level 5 on the enjoyment scale. And then the second bite might be 4. And then by the time it just gets to be okay, guess what they do? They push it away, but they don't deprive, because when you deprive, you always end up in a binge. I never deprive myself. And you know, all these other diets where they have prepackaged meals, they're telling you what to eat. You're not listening to what your body is calling for.
And I just thought, yeah, that is exactly what my experience has always been. every diet I have ever done has either involved extreme restriction to specific portion sizes for every meal, or cutting entire foods out altogether and labeling them as either off limits or bad. And so I would either end up ravenously hungry from small portion sizes, or just giving into cravings because I was cutting out foods that I wanted to eat so badly, and every single diet had failed me. This was a totally different approach to weight loss, or eating in general, eating any food I wanted and never depriving myself, which I know sounds kind of like a gimmick, like this one diet I did that claims you could eat more, exercise less, and lose weight.
You can actually eat more, exercise less, and make your entire body over exactly the way you want it, all in as little as 6 weeks.
But eating more on this diet meant I had to eat more often, and the meals consisted of small portions of lean meats and veggies. So yeah, I was eating 5 meals a day, but it was things like 4 ounces of chicken and a cup of broccoli. And now I love chicken and broccoli, but try eating that for every single meal, 5 meals a day for 6 months. As soon as I finished watching that interview, I went back and I read through that mindful eating booklet thoroughly, which I printed out just because I prefer to read things off of a printed page. The first thing it talks about is listening to your physical hunger cues, which I used to think I did, and I've learned now that a lot of times what I thought was hunger was actually just a craving, a smell, a commercial, something that would make me think about food, and then I would go, oh, this is making me hungry, now I want to eat. But I've realized now that that's actually a form of emotional eating. And I always thought of emotional eating as just being like the stereotypical thing you see in movies where somebody goes and binges on food or ice cream because they're depressed. But it's true, I was rarely eating based on my body's actual hunger. I was usually eating because of some sort of emotional trigger. Even boredom. Boredom is an emotion. And so the booklet helped me to understand my own natural hunger cues better, and it even offers a hunger scale. It's a chart from 1 to 10. 1 being so hungry you can't even think straight or make a decision about what to eat, and 10 being so full that it hurts and you need to lie down. And on a daily basis, after most meals, I'd usually be somewhere between a 7 to 10. It also gives the advice to slow down, which truthfully is something I've kind of resented hearing all my life. I'm a very fast eater. I always have been. I always just devoured my food so quickly that I'd go back for seconds because I didn't allow myself enough time for my fullness cues to fully kick in. And growing up, my mom would always tell me to slow down, which always irritated me because to me, I was just enjoying my food. And then even when I got married, I'd finish my food way before my wife, and she'd look over and say, "Geez, are you done already?" And I'd be like, I just eat fast. Now, this took actual concentrated effort on my part to apply because it went against a deeply ingrained habit that I had been doing all my life. So I really had to force myself to slow down, focus on the food, focus on each bite. Think about the smell, the taste, the seasonings, the texture, the temperature, really focus on and appreciate the food. And I would put my fork down in between bites, which is something I never did. It was always just a continual back and forth from plate to mouth. And I assessed how much enjoyment I was getting with each bite as I went along. Was I still getting the same enjoyment on the 5th bite that I was from the first? I noticed that as the meal progressed, the first several bites usually were way, way more enjoyable. And then it was still okay as it went along, but it was something I never really thought about before until I started getting to the point of being really full. And then I'm like, I don't like it anymore.
Better get a bucket, I'm gonna throw up.
And along with waiting until I was actually physically hungry before I would eat, I would assess where I was on the hunger scale as I progressed with my meal. And then, the thing that really took me a bit of getting used to in the beginning, as soon as I would feel the first hint of fullness, that first sign that my hunger was subsiding and being satiated, I would put my fork down and stop eating. no matter how much was left on my plate, whether it was half the meal or one bite. There were times when I had 2 meatballs left or 1 chicken wing or like the last few bites of a burrito. It didn't matter how little was left. I would stop eating at that first sign of fullness and put the rest of the food in the fridge. And for a while, each time I did that, I would think, man, I don't think I've eaten enough. I'm still kind of hungry. Like, I'm just going to be hungry again in an hour or two. But here's what really surprised me. As the hour progressed, I would feel more and more full. And usually within 2 hours, I was completely full. Not stuffed silly, but no hunger at all and completely satisfied. And when I'd think about where I was on the hunger scale, I was normally maybe a 5 or a 6, which was satisfied and energized or pleasantly full and energized. On top of that, I didn't feel sluggish or tired or have any brain fog. I actually felt good. You know, I used to have a post-meal stance where if I was at a restaurant sitting in a booth, after a big meal, I would try to lean back as much as I could, maybe put my arm on the armrest next to me or the windowsill, and I would put my leg up on the booth next to me and just try to get as close to the position of reclining on a couch as possible because I needed to lay back and digest. But eating this way, I was fine and I could think clearly. I always thought it was solely my ADHD that made it hard for me to focus on conversations or watch a movie after a meal or learn the rules to a board game after a big dinner with friends. And like I finally realized with my body diverting all that energy and blood to trying to digest the massive amount of food that I had just shoved in, that it gave me so much brain fog and made it way harder to think clearly. And I have become so much more present in conversations now, and I can retain so much more just since changing my eating habits. So I stuck with this new approach to eating, which was so different from the way that I used to eat. I felt like I was relearning how to eat. And I still ate whatever I wanted. I still had pizza and cheeseburgers and pasta and wings, you name it. But I just changed the way I ate. I slowed down. I respected my fullness. I avoided emotional eating, and I readjusted my relationship with food. And I never felt deprived. I never went hungry, and I still had candy bars and desserts if I wanted them and I had the room. I had anything I wanted. And I started to lose weight, significant weight. And it made me realize that this is why every diet had failed me, because I was only eating what someone else told me I should eat. On some diets, I'd have to eat specific measured portions of low-calorie foods. So of course I felt hungry and unsatisfied because our hunger levels vary constantly and they depend on so many factors. When we ate last, how much we ate last, how much physical activity we had that day. There is no one-size-fits-all portion for every meal. And our bodies naturally give us the cues to know when to eat and when to stop. I just never paid attention to them before. That's why low-carb diets would work for me for a while, but eventually I'd stop seeing results and I'd give up. Because I would cut out carbs, which would cause weight loss, but I didn't change my eating habits. I was still stuffing myself with low-carb food. My relationship with food was still the same. And eventually, when I would plateau, the weight loss would stop, and I'd get discouraged, and the cravings for carbs would then win out, and I'd go back to my old habits. This literally fixed the issue that I'd had my entire life. And as I said, it took real effort in the beginning. But that's just part of changing a habit, you know? But I was always satisfied after every meal, even if it took a little bit of time. And as the year went on, it slowly became easy. Over the course of the last year, I went from 250 pounds to 180 pounds. That's a weight I have not been since, I don't know, middle school. Like, I literally have not weighed 180 since I was a kid. And I can't believe how good I feel. The things that I can do now, I couldn't have even imagined being able to do when I was 130 pounds heavier. Back then, no joke, I mean, it was a challenge just to roll myself out of bed. The thought of me trying to do yard work back then was kind of out of the question. I used to hire somebody to mow the lawn, and we were renting a house that was just on kind of an average-sized property. And since then, we've bought a house that's on a little over half an acre, and I have no problem going out and mowing the entire yard and weed eating, then coming in and cooking lunch and maybe going out and running a few errands and then coming in and doing work all in the same day. And I know when I was at my heaviest, maybe I would have done about a quarter of that yard and just been completely wiped out and come in, had to just crash on the couch and just be done for the day. Which makes sense because I was carrying an additional 130 pounds at the time. To give you an idea of how much weight 130 pounds is, it's the equivalent of 15.5 gallons of water. So just imagine taking over 15 full jugs of water and strapping them all over your body and then try to go out and mow the lawn. Or try to get up out of bed or off the couch, or try running and jumping on stage for 90 minutes straight. Like, yeah, you can see why I was struggling so much. I know I've heard other people's success stories where they talk about how much their health has improved, but actually living the experience and feeling the difference is kind of indescribable. I don't think I have a copy of my lab work from 2018 when I first started, but I do have the one from 2020, and when compared with my recent labs, the improvements are significant. My total cholesterol has dropped from 219 to 195. My HDL has gone up. My LDL has gone down. My triglycerides dropped from 158 all the way down to 69. Also, my dangerously high blood pressure is gone. My blood pressure is now consistently in an excellent range. In fact, the doctor last month looked at me and said, "You've got the blood pressure of a 16-year-old, which, what? And my resting heart rate, which I think used to be in the high 60s, now averages at around 49 beats per minute, which, according to a chart I looked at, is not average or even above average, but it's considered to be in the athlete range, which, like, that doesn't even sound right. There's no way that's me. All of my life, every doctor's visit has been, you need to lose weight, you need to do better, you have room for improvement, you've got to improve your health. And now my primary is like, you're doing a great job, keep up the good work. And my cardiologist actually recently said, I don't even need to see him anymore. And all this in such a short amount of time is insane. All I know is this has changed my life, drastically improved the quality of my life, and more than likely extended my potential lifespan. One of the highlights of this year for me was getting a chance to meet the guy who was such a big inspiration to me when I started all this about 5 years ago. Back in July, I had the chance to meet Kevin Smith very briefly at a convention photo op, and he gives you everything you would want in a fan-celebrity interaction. So I brought 2 photos with me for the photo op. One was of me and one was of him, both us at our heaviest weights, and he was happy to hold up his before photo. But he gave me a huge hug, and as we were hugging, I just said, I've lost 115 pounds. And I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of my favorite celebrities at a lot of conventions over the years, and it's always exciting, but I don't normally get starstruck because, yeah, they're famous, but they're also just people. But I distinctly remember this moment, as I could hear myself saying those words out loud to this guy who was such a major influence on me being able to do this major life change, especially after a lifetime of believing that it was impossible for me to ever do this. I think it was the first real surreal moment of my life. Like, as soon as I was saying it, I had this weird moment of almost dissociation where I was just like, what the heck am I saying? That's not right. I'm lying. I haven't lost that much weight. That's impossible. Like, it didn't feel real. It almost felt like a dream. I'm like, no, none of this is true. This is not real life. Even though in that moment I am literally hugging Kevin Smith and I can see and feel with my arms around him that he also has made just as dramatic a physical change. It was just so surreal in that moment. It was the one thing in my life that I always believed was impossible. And so it was hard to believe that it had actually become a reality. I mean, even now, I still haven't fully gotten used to it. Like, I still expect to look heavier when I see my reflection in the mirror. I'll go to get in the car And I'm always caught off guard when I see my reflection in the car window because I think I'm going to look, you know, maybe 30, 40 pounds heavier. And I still have not fully accepted that I've lost as much weight as I actually have. But back to the Kevin Smith story. For anybody that's done one of these celebrity photo ops, you know they move super quickly because they have to keep the line going. You normally walk up, say hi, pose for the photo, and then get out of there. So there's no time to talk, you know, and I've taken photos with a few other celebrity actors who have all been very sweet, but, you know, they're super brief interactions. So I was really caught off guard because as soon as I told him, you know, I'd lost the weight, Kevin was like, wow, that's awesome. Congratulations. And then as we started to pose for the photo, he's like, so how'd you do it? And I wasn't even prepared for that because I knew there was no time for a conversation, but I gave him a quick answer and we took the photo, and then he said a few more kind words and I just thanked him for being such a big inspiration. So this photo right here really means a lot to me because it's not just another celebrity photo op, but this is a really significant moment in my life. And I'm just so thankful that he survived that heart attack, and I know that he has probably helped lots of other people to be inspired to make changes in their life, as well as sharing uncommon heart attack symptoms that other people have been able to then identify when they were having heart attacks. So I know really he has helped and saved a lot of lives just by living and sharing his story. So anyway, that's how I lost 130 pounds and completely transformed my body and my health. These days are all about balance. I try to have a balanced diet. You know, some days I'll have oatmeal for breakfast, a salad for dinner. Other days I'll have a sausage, egg, and cheese breakfast sandwich, and I'll have pizza for dinner. But it's all about keeping things in balance. And by the way, I am still a fast eater, just so you know. You know, mindful eating definitely helped to give me the tools to understand my hunger and my fullness better. And now I can better gauge how much I can eat and how much I need from meal to meal and know when to stop. But I still eat pretty quickly, so I just figured I should mention that. But it has gotten so much easier to be balanced with food, and I feel like for the first time ever that I am actually in control and not my impulses. I still walk at least 5 days a week, and in the past several months I've started working out with dumbbells, and that's just to kind of tone up and build some strength and actually, for the first time in my life, gain some muscle. And these days, I try to be more balanced with my work and with my mental health. I used to just have a work, go, go, go mindset all the time. And now I'm really focused on being balanced with my work and my personal life much more. And I've learned far more about ADHD in the past few months than I ever knew my entire life. And that's a whole other video topic on its own. But the one last thing I want to mention is at the beginning of the video, I said that I could never pinpoint a traumatic event or some kind of a reason for my overeating. I wasn't trying to find comfort. It wasn't to fill an emotional void. You know, I just loved eating for pleasure. And it wasn't until this month that I finally realized that it's connected to my ADHD. That constant obsessive search for excitement and dopamine, that extremely impulsive nature, the thing that caused me to dive headfirst into starting a steampunk band or pursuing a voiceover career or making a large-scale independent movie, even when logic and reason would tell most people, okay, hold on, slow down, think things through and approach this reasonably. It's the same thing that made me so obsessive and impulsive with food. It's the same reason I had so much trouble drinking alcohol in moderation. That continual drive for excitement, for dopamine, and that impulsivity, that's what drove all my eating choices all my life. And now that I finally understand that, I feel like so many other things in my life finally make sense. This past year has been amazing for me, not just physically, but mentally. Weight loss is mental. Change of any sort is mental. All my life, I had never thought about my mental health. I didn't think I needed to. I didn't think I had any issues. But now that I have learned so much about myself and my disorder, and I've seen improvements physically, in my work with my clients, in my friendships, in my marriage. It's just wild. Well, I don't know how informative or helpful this video has been, but I'm sure it has been way too long. But that's how I managed to make these changes and finally get my weight and health under control. And even though I'm not sponsored by anything I've mentioned in this video, I've included links in the description just in case you're interested to check anything out for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and listening to me ramble on about my stupid self for a little while. I hope it's been informative and maybe helps somebody in the same way that making these changes has helped me. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thanks so much. See you next time. Cheers.